The night started with laughter that cut sharper than any blade, cruel and hollow in its echo, spilling across the quiet neighborhood street like shards of broken glass. A group of neighbors, led by the ever-boastful HOA Karen, stood around whispering, pointing, then outright mocking the woman who had just walked out from her modest home. That woman, Elena, kept her chin high even as the cruel words dripped from their mouths, each jab aimed at the scars that lined her arms, her neck, and the side of her face. They thought she had been broken, that her scars were some mark of weakness. Karen was the loudest, laughing as she raised her phone and snapped a picture without consent, announcing to everyone around, "Hideous, isn't it? And she thinks she belongs here." But there was something Karen didn't see. She didn't notice the quiet figure standing nearby, a man with broad shoulders and a silence in his eyes that only combat veterans carry. His name was Marcus, and he had served long enough to know what those scars meant. He had seen men and women walk through fire, bleed, and return marked forever, not broken but transformed. He didn't speak at first, but when Elena shifted her sleeve, when the edge of a tattoo inked with precision revealed itself, his heart seized. He knew that emblem, knew it better than he knew his own reflection. It was the insignia of one of the most elite units ever forged in the armed forces. A brotherhood and sisterhood sworn to missions most never even heard of. And Elena had carried it on her flesh. The laughter around them stumbled into silence as Marcus stepped forward. Karen smirked, thinking he was about to join her cruel chorus. Instead, his voice cracked the night open like thunder. "Shut your mouth." The force in his tone froze Karen mid-laugh, her phone still raised. The other neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, their smugness faltering. Marcus turned to Elena, and for the first time his hardened face softened, his eyes locking on that tattoo with reverence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but trembling with respect. "You served." Elena's eyes flickered with pain, then defiance. She gave a small nod. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, barking out, "Oh, come on. Don't fall for her act. She's just a washed-up nobody who hides behind pity stories. Look at her. She's scarred and pathetic." But Marcus didn't even glance at Karen. He stepped closer, lowering his head slightly, as if before a superior officer, whispering words that no one expected. "That tattoo, only members of Ghost Company bear it. There were 12 of you. Are you telling me you're one of them?" The crowd gasped, some confused, others whispering nervously. Karen scoffed. "Ghost what? He's just making stuff up to scare you all. She's a fraud. Don't let her play the veteran card for sympathy." Elena stood still, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, until finally she pulled back her sleeve fully. There it was, bold and undeniable, the symbol Marcus knew by heart. Gasps turned into silence, so heavy it strangled the night air. Karen's smirk faltered, her eyes narrowing in confusion. But Marcus's knees nearly buckled as he saluted her, his voice raw with awe. "Ma'am, you're a legend. They told us none of you made it back alive." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Elena spoke, her voice steady, cutting through the shame and mockery like a blade. "I did make it back. Barely. And every scar I carry was earned protecting people who will never know my name. People like you, who stand here laughing instead of understanding the price paid." She turned her gaze directly at Karen, who shifted uncomfortably but still tried to sneer. "But I will never hide again." Karen, red-faced and cornered by the growing shift in the crowd, snapped back. "Oh, don't act like you're some hero. Anyone can get a tattoo. Anyone can make up stories. You're just milking this for pity. But Marcus's booming voice shattered her last defense. You think this is a game. Karen, you think a symbol carried by one of the most classified special operations units is fake. I saw them move through fire when the rest of us would have fallen. I lost brothers in battles they led. You have no idea what you're talking about. His words echoed, raw and furious, and people around began murmuring, turning their backs on Karen, the shame of her cruelty spreading across her face like fire. Karen tried to laugh it off, but her chuckle was brittle, desperate. She gestured wildly at the scars, as if still clinging to the power of mockery. Well, if she's so tough, why doesn't she prove it? Why doesn't she show some kind of proof that she isn't just pretending to be some soldier? That was when Elena's phone buzzed. She opened it, hesitated, then turned the screen around for everyone to see. A video grainy, old, but real played, showing a blurred but undeniable image of her unit in the desert. Flames behind them, soldiers carrying the wounded, and her, pulling two men out of the fire with nothing but her hands and grit. The crowd went dead quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop. Karen's smirk dissolved completely, her face pale as if the ground had dropped beneath her feet. But Elena didn't gloat. Instead, she spoke with a raw honesty that cut deeper than any insult. I didn't come back to be worshipped. I didn't survive so people could clap for me. I came back to heal, to live quietly. And if all you see are scars, then you've missed the whole story. These scars aren't weakness. They are proof I refused to die when death tried to take me. Marcus stepped closer, standing shoulder to shoulder with her, his presence towering with protection. You're not alone anymore, he said. And for the first time that night, Elena's lips curved into the smallest, most defiant smile. Karen's fists clenched, her voice trembling as she tried to bark back. You think you're better than us. You think scars make you a hero. Please. This whole show is pathetic. But her words fell flat, rejected by the silent, shifting eyes of the neighbors who once laughed with her but now looked at her with disgust. The night had turned against her, and she could feel it slipping from her grasp. At that moment, another unexpected figure emerged from the shadows. An older man, hunched slightly but carrying a quiet authority, stepped into the circle of light. He was a retired colonel, one who had moved to the neighborhood years ago and rarely spoke of his service. But his voice carried weight as he said, Karen, you've crossed a line that cannot be undone. I know exactly who she is. And if you think mocking the scars of a ghost company survivor will win you power here, you're more foolish than I imagined. His words struck like a hammer, and Karen's mouth dropped open, searching for words that never came. The crowd shifted, the balance of power crumbling under her feet. The air had turned sharp and electric. Every set of eyes trained on Karen as if the mask she wore had finally shattered. She tried to speak again, but her words came out hollow, weak, like a balloon hissing air. You're all just falling for her pity act, she stammered. Yet even she seemed unconvinced by her own claim. Elena's scars glistened under the streetlight, no longer something to mock, but instead shining like metals etched into flesh. She didn't need to say a word, now every neighbor had seen the proof, felt the gravity of Marcus's voice, and heard the colonel's declaration. Karen stood small despite her size, her arrogance caving into trembling defensiveness. Marcus turned toward her, his tone cutting, steady as stone. You made a mistake tonight. Karen, you mocked something you could never understand. You mocked sacrifice, pain, survival. and you try to turn a whole neighborhood into your stage for cruelty. But tonight, everyone sees who you really are. The words rippled through the group like fire spreading fast. Neighbors who once huddled near Karen began stepping away, their eyes darting down with shame, forever laughing along. A mother pulled her child closer, whispering something about never mocking scars again. Karen's face reddened, her fists curling at her sides. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, her voice shrill. "She's no hero. Heroes don't come back broken. Heroes don't hide in little houses. She's just—" Her words stopped when Elena stepped forward, her presence quiet yet commanding, her scars no longer hidden. "Heroes don't always come back whole," Elena said. "Sometimes they come back carrying the weight of everyone who didn't. Sometimes they come back scarred because they stood in the fire when others ran. But at least they came back." Silence fell again. Then, softly but firmly, the colonel added, "And sometimes, Karen, the bravest thing is to live each day in a world that never really understands what was lost." The words pierced Karen deeper than any insult could. She tried to scoff, but her voice faltered. She turned in circles, searching for an ally among the crowd. But no one would meet her eyes. Even her usual companions, the ones who laughed at her cruel jokes, had drifted away, unwilling to stand in her shadow anymore. For once, Karen stood truly alone. Elena could have ended it there, could have walked back inside and let Karen stew in her downfall. But instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something that glinted faintly under the lamplight, a small dog tag, battered and bent from fire, engraved with names. She held it up, her hand steady. "These aren't mine," she said. "They belong to my brothers and sisters who didn't make it back. I carry them so I never forget. Every time you look at me and see scars, I see them, and I live for them." A hush swept the street as the weight of her words settled on every soul present. Marcus saluted again, his jaw tight. The colonel bowed his head. Even the youngest in the crowd could feel the gravity of survival, the price of freedom, the reminder that some people carried pain so others could laugh in safe streets without fear. Karen's face crumpled, fury and shame battling across her features. "You think this makes you untouchable? You think people will worship you now?" She spat, though her voice trembled like a brittle branch in the wind. "No," Elena said simply. "I don't need worship. I need people to remember what scars really mean. To remember kindness, dignity. Because cruelty like yours is the easiest way to dishonor the people who never came home." Something shifted then, something irreversible. Neighbors began clapping softly, hesitant at first but growing louder, until the sound echoed through the street. Some even had tears streaming down their cheeks. Others held hands, and one older woman pressed her palm against her heart. Karen tried to scream over the applause, waving her arms like a drowning woman. But no one listened anymore. Her reign of arrogance had ended in the face of truth, and the crowd had chosen to walk away from her poison. Marcus leaned in close to Elena and whispered, "You changed everything tonight. You showed them the truth." Elena shook her head gently. The truth was always there. They just had to stop laughing long enough to see it. Karen stumbled backward, her face streaked with sweat and anger. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret turning on me," she shouted. But the threat carried no weight. People ignored her, dispersing slowly. Their loyalties shifted forever. The colonel fixed her with one last stare, a gaze that stripped her bare of every ounce of false power. "The only one who will regret anything," Karen, is you. Because you chose cruelty when you had the chance to choose humanity. Karen stormed off, muttering curses under her breath. But the silence that followed was not for her. It belonged to Elena, who stood with her scars bared and her head unbowed. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. If you ever need someone to stand guard, you know where to find me, he said. Elena gave a small smile, her voice soft yet strong. I've stood guard long enough. Now I just want to live. But thank you for seeing me. The neighbors, one by one, approached her before heading home. A handshake, a whispered apology, a thank you. Each gesture chipped away at the wall she had built to protect herself from the cruelty of the world. By the time the street grew quiet again, Elena no longer felt like a shadow haunting her own neighborhood. She felt seen, respected, and no longer alone. Karen would fume. Of course. She would try to reclaim her power in petty ways. But it wouldn't matter. Her downfall had been sealed not by shouting, not by revenge, but by truth spoken plainly in the face of cruelty. That night, Elena sat by her window, the dog tag still in her hand. She whispered the names engraved upon it, as she always did. But this time her voice didn't shake. This time, she knew her scars no longer spoke only of pain, they spoke of survival, of dignity, of a story that had silenced hatred. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe healing didn't mean hiding. The street lamp flickered once, casting her reflection faintly against the glass. Scars and all, she saw herself clearly. A survivor, a warrior, a woman who had faced cruelty and stood taller than it. And somewhere in the darkness, Karen sat seething in her empty house, stripped of her audience, forced to live with the bitter truth that no cruelty can erase the honor carried in scars. The story of that night spread quietly through the neighborhood, told in whispers at first, then openly, until people began repeating it not as gossip, but as a reminder of why scars matter, a reminder of why cruelty must never be given power. So the next time anyone dared laugh at someone different, the neighbors remembered Elena standing tall under the streetlight, scars bare, courage undeniable, and the way a bully crumbled when the truth was revealed. Because sometimes the fiercest revenge isn't in striking back, it's in standing strong enough that cruelty destroys itself. And that is exactly what Karen never saw coming. What about you? Do you think the neighbors were too late to realize their mistake? Or was it enough that they finally stood against her cruelty?